Morality is based on what person thinks is right or wrong. Usually the individual, sometimes related to the group, right? It's considered a gradual development of the concept of right and wrong because as you start to get older and more mature, it sort of changes, right? It's related to conscious religious values, your social attitudes, behavior, political context, all of those things. Uh, Holberg's theory of moral development was actually three stages, which were further subdivided into two stages per larger stage, right? So there's the pre-conventional moral development, conventional moral development, post-conventional moral development. Each of them have two stages each, so totally six stages. He took a sample of 72 boys from Chicago, 58 of whom were followed up at 3 yearly intervals for 20 years. So it's a longitudinal study, and he sort of analyzed the change in moral development and moral understanding and created these six stages. The first stage is called the pre-conventional stage. This level one is for people. Usually, this level one is considered moral development of kids from the age of from birth to 9 years. The first stage is about obedience and punishment. Here, young children see rules as fixed. They see rules as absolute, that they can't skirt anything. The entire reason to obey a rule is so that you don't get punished. Um, what that does eventually is it creates a sense of right and wrong about the behavior that is punished and not punished, and therefore the child follows them very rigidly, right? And the idea is that if there is someone superior, you just listen to them because they are capable of punishing you, right? Everything is related to physical well-being. Then you have naively egotistical stage in the second stage of pre-conventional moral development. Here, the child slightly gets better, right? And they start to think of morals and right wrong as everything that benefits them, right? So if a particular behavior will benefit them, then it's the right behavior. Okay. So it's slightly selfish, but they've moved on from obeying just to avoid punishment, right? Sometimes this is also reciprocal, but reciprocity is also there only when their own interests are being met, right? So the child may be motivated by vengeance or an eye for an eye philosophy, very self-absorbed, believes in equal sharing, irrespective if somebody needs more or less, right? Everyone should get equally, uh, and believes that the end justifies the meaning that if the outcome is benefiting me, doesn't matter how I get it, right? Uh, and expects to be rewarded for every non-selfish deed he or she does. So children will come and tell their parents, I did this, that, and they expect to be rewarded, right? So that's the second stage, naively egotistical. Then by the time children reach between 10 and 15 years of age, they reach the level two, which is conventional morality, right? Conventional morality because this is a very typical sort of idea of morality. This is the good boy, good girl orientation, meaning that all moral things about what is good and what is not good is based on society and conformity of social norms that already exist, and I want to be a nice person, and nice person is following everything that society says, right? And all my relationships, everything, all my moral attitude is based on that. So I will not question authority, I will not say anything negative, I will just accept so that other people like me. So approval is very very important, therefore you're conforming all the time. uh, Feels that intentions are as important as deeds. So just because you thought that you want to buy me a gift but you didn't buy me a gift is enough for me, because it indicated that you cared, right? That sort of idea. Um, Empathy begins to develop, which is interesting because for them to be able to think of themselves as nice people, they need to see what other people are seeing, and therefore they put themselves in other people's shoes, right? Then stage four is law and order. This is where most human beings are in terms of their moral development. This is a stage where people look at society and they make judgments of the effect of all these social norms on the people in the society, right? So they start to think about the effect of rules. They start to think about the effect of doing one's duty, the effect of respecting authority, right? They also believe that the rules should not change. They've sustained for so long, so they should not be changed. And you must do your duty. Uh, but it's not about being nice, or it's not about being good or bad. But what your duty is important, right? You have to respect authority. You have to respect people in authority, positions of authority, because it keeps social order moving, right? Supports the rights of the majority without concern for those in the minority. This is why democracy is the most widely circulated political belief in the world, because most of the world believes in this stage of law and order. So democracy is basically a numbers game, right? It's not about equal representation based on the numbers and statistics and all of that. So it's the majority domination. and therefore democracy is everywhere because everyone is more or less in this moral stage, right? Moral stage of development. Um, then if you go to the post-conventional stage of morality, which is anyone above the age of 16 is capable of reaching, here the understanding is that there are rules and all, we understand. However, people have different value systems, different opinions. Uh, Rules of law are important because they maintain society, but all the members in the society should agree to these rules. It cannot be put on them, right? Uh, and the idea is that whatever decision is taken, it should benefit as many people as possible. If it benefits as many people as possible, then it's a good rule or a law or a good moral standard to be in, right? Believes in the idea of consensus that everyone agrees rather than majority rule. It understands the importance of the rights of the minority, especially because they're lesser in number, right? And also believes that change is possible, but only through the system, right? So system is still at the center of it. However, they're accepting of change. Last kind is called the universal ethical principle stage, right? This is based on the larger law without taking into the political social structure, saying that humanity is the main thing, right? People should get justice irrespective of where they come from, what they do, and it's a very abstract sort of space. If the law doesn't agree and it doesn't respect the individual, it should be done away with, irrespective of how much beneficial it is to the society, right? So there are higher moral principles than just social norms that sustain things. Uh, and they are always willing to accept the consequences of disobedience as long as they believe that the social rule that they are talking about is a universal principle that is applicable to everybody, irrespective of laws, etc. So believes that the dignity of humanity is sacred and all human beings have value, irrespective of where they come from, what they do, etc., etc. Right? People who followed Kohlberg and later they found, like based on Kohlberg's theory, when they did research, they found that there are major sex differences in terms of understanding morality. For males, morality is based on justice, rights, no partiality, code of conduct. Whereas for females, morality is based more on care, responsibility, care for suffering, and emotional needs, right? And this is what they found. But then theorists were like, oh, this cannot be true. Like all females will not be this way, all males will not be this way, right? So then Gilligan said that especially for females, this is a very sexist view of morality. So Gilligan did her own research and she found her own ideas of morality, right? So in this, there is a, again, it's a transitory thing where initially morality is about individual survival. So you'll try and benefit yourself. Importance is given to what is practical and beneficial for oneself. Later, the person will move from selfishness to responsibility and they will start to look at things that will benefit other people and themselves, right? So the second stage is reached where they say goodness as self-sacrifice. So for women, according to Gilligan, the second stage of moral development is where they'll start to see that self-sacrifice is a great moral ideal to look at, right? So you sacrifice your own needs to fulfill others' needs, and then you'll move from there to the morality of goodness to truth, right? From trying to be good and self-sacrificing to really realizing the actual morality of truth, which is basically being non-violent, authentic, uh, finding an equal balance between benefiting other people and oneself, not trying to hurt anybody, right? Hurting anybody in any way or form is considered immoral. And according to Gilligan, this is the greatest form of moral reasoning to reach. Then you have Damon. Damon gives us the three stages of positive justice that people go through. At level 0, children think of justice as everything should benefit me. That's justice, right? Justice is done if I win. Then they reach level 1 between 5 and 9, where everything should be strictly equal and everything should be reciprocal, irrespective of who needs, doesn't need, doesn't matter. Merit is sacred. Whoever is doing well should win, right? That's another level of moral development. And then level 2, which is for people who are above the age of 10, and again there are varying differences. uh, they understand that most things in life are relative, like uh, if someone is benefiting, someone else might be losing. If I'm not benefiting now, I may benefit later. Just because I put in the right amount of effort doesn't mean I'll get the right kind of marks, right? All of those things are slightly relative. And in terms of a general moral thing, that some people need more help than other people because of XYZ reasons, and therefore they deserve to get those help, right? So then you reach the level 2 of uh, positive justice or morality according to Damon, right? Which is basically the combination of the individual's mental development and its relationship to how society affects them and how they interact with society, right? Across the lifespan. Now, the most important component of psychosocial development is emotional development, which is basically the change and development of emotions, which become more complex as the child ages and gets older and reaches adulthood. It starts with simple emotions like crying, smiling, and over time you start reaching emotions such as fear, then disgust, which is a really complicated emotion, surprise, right? All of them are elicited by non-verbal behavior as well as verbal behavior, right? Um, Initially in childhood, during infancy, especially, a child's emotional expression is sort of showcasing what will come later in life. It's a showcase of the child's temperament, which eventually culminates into their personality. And in different cultures, children are slightly different in how they react and behave emotionally. Um, and therefore, those changes are noticeable even when they become adults, right? So during infancy, emotions are usually noticed by two ways: when the child is crying or smiling. And both of these things serve very important purposes where they make the child sociable. So it begins to interact with more people, and the more people it interacts with, the greater ability it gets in terms of emotional intelligence. It helps them build connections with people. It helps them regulate their own emotions. So when they're crying unnecessarily and they're reprimanded for it, they sort of learn how not to keep behaving in ways that are not appropriate. Um, Smiling is again something that's seen when the child is sleeping. It's indicative usually of REM sleep, which is again linked with seeing dreams, right? Uh, Crying, especially, is very often used by children to call for attention or call the parent and showcase what something is, so if something is wrong, right? Um, Now, social smile is something that develops around the age of 10. Social smile is basically when the child starts to smile at people and objects it's familiar with. So, in the initial years, initial few months, the child has not achieved object permanence, right? Which is basically the child doesn't remember the same people, and therefore everything is a new experience for them. But by the end of the eighth month, like we learned yesterday with PIJ, the child has achieved object permanence, which is meaning that they know that certain things in their environment are going to remain consistent even if they're not in front of them. So social smile is a development, it's a cognitive development where the child is now showing other people that it remembers them, and therefore it's showing it by sort of smiling at them, saying that, oh, I recognize you, right? So and you're a caregiver for me, you take care of me, I'm dependent on you. All of those things are elicited when you see the child smile at people regularly, and these are people whom the child sees on a daily basis, right? It will not show this same reaction to somebody new after the 10th month, right? Um, Around the sixth month, eighth month, and actually until somebody goes to school for the first time, they engage in stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. Stranger anxiety is when the child is fearful of someone new, right? You notice a lot of kids when like a new person comes into their lives or in their vicinity, they'll immediately start to cry or they'll get really fearful or they'll shriek. That's because they're engaging in stranger anxiety. They don't know this person. They're not engaging with outside people very often, and therefore they have an anxiety reaction when they see a new person, right? It's a new change in their environment. So again, it's very important that the child, when it's really young, keeps meeting new people all the time so that it never learns about stranger anxiety in the first place. However, during corona and the lockdown, this is something that has gotten magnified because children are so used to the same group of people all the time that new members are not being assimilated easily, right? uh, Something slightly different but more problematic is called separation anxiety, which is when the child is separated from their primary caregiver, they'll start to again shriek and cry and get really uncomfortable, and themselves will go through a lot of discomfort. So will the caregiver, right? This is usually difficult when the child is going to school for the first time, because that's the first time it's being separated from its home and it has to go to an alien location and sit there for 6, 7 hours and then come back, right? And then the next morning that will get repeated and the child knows what's going to happen. So again, that becomes slightly problematic, and it's a adjusting thing that children have to get used to. But they have emotional reactions to it, right? Uh, Children around the first year, second year of age also start to engage in social referencing, which is basically if they don't know what to do in a particular situation, they'll see what other people are doing and behave accordingly, right? They'll imitate other people's behavior. Uh, on the age of 2, we start to notice that children begin to have empathy. It's obviously not as sophisticated as it is for adults. However, they have, you can see that they're able to see things from other people's perspectives. When they see somebody sad, for example, they'll also get sad, right? Which is indicative of empathy. If they see somebody crying, they might also start crying. Um, then when they reach adolescence and adulthood, adolescence is usually referred to a time of storm and stress because there is a lot of emotional change that takes place. You will see children getting really angry, really sad, really like crying a lot, or really happy, and they have these intense emotional experiences which are all over the place, right? Uh, and they sort of become the building block for their adult emotional behavior. So they'll start to move in distinct ways, different manners. At the same time, there is also an emotional intelligence that is developing where they understand that, okay, they can manage their emotions. They do have self control of their emotions. Um, and that it's important that they have self control so that they are viewed in a certain positive light, right? So, all of this culminates into the child deciding, at the adolescent deciding what kind of emotional behavior do they want to have moving forward, right? Uh, so emotional selectivity theory is that where the individual looks to build on positive, rewarding relationships and sort of improve their satisfaction and contentment from those relationships while leaving out relationships that are far away and in the periphery, and that might cause some form of emotional risk, right? In terms of emotions, again, and personality, we say that if all children have temperament until 15, and then it is considered a personality because still 15 there is still liability of a lot of change, but post 15 the emotional structure more or less remains the same, right? And temperament is more biologically based, so it's more reactive in nature. However, it's not really something that stays forever, right? And personality builds around whatever temperament they have by the age of 15. uh, then this is a slightly different concept now in terms of psychosocial development. For children, one of the interesting concepts is about goodness of fit, which is the matching of the parent personality with the infant's temperament, right? If the parent's personality and the infant's temperament match, then it's considered a good fit where the parent and the child will be in sync in terms of what kind of development goals they are setting for one another, right? So child rearing then becomes easier for the parent. However, sometimes that might not happen, and therefore there is a lot of friction that develops as a result, right? And even within children, there are slow to warm children, easy children, and difficult children, right? Easy children are children who are naturally getting along with everybody. They don't cry too much. They are more or less just happy to be existing, right? Then you have slow to warm children who take a little bit of time to adjust to situations. So initially they'll cry, but then they'll adjust. And then you have difficult children who are just, they don't want to accept a new change in their environment. So they're very difficult to rear, right? They require a lot of sensitive care. So again, goodness of fit is something that's very important, and usually it's the parents' prerogative to change to the child's temperament, right? Again, emotional psychosocial development, gender is a very important concept. So you're born with sort of anatomical sex, but then gender is something that you develop as a consequence of your interaction with the society, right? So infants surprisingly develop understanding of gender quite early, which is again what Freud said, right? And they start to have these schemas about what boys and girls are supposed to be, and they have these categorized specific things that, okay, boys are supposed to be this way, males are supposed to be this way, females are supposed to be this way. However, uh, there is very little psychological or behavioral difference that exists between males and females. And during the early part of infancy, these differences are really not something that children bother about, including till they reach early childhood, right? But in middle childhood, these things become really extreme. These beliefs about their roles are very extreme, and it's the most extreme it's there at any point in their lifespan. Even adults don't hold such extreme gender stereotypes, right? And they'll say that boys will not play with girls, and I don't play with boys, I don't like boys, I don't like girls, and this sort of behavior, right? Um, but then as they get into adolescence, there is a transition that takes place, and then you start to get attracted to uh, generally the opposite gender. But then again, now that is your orientation is dependent on so many other factors. So you may be attracted to anybody, right? And sexuality is something that will develop by adolescence. Um, During this time, again, middle childhood and adolescence is a very important time for gender socialization, where you begin to understand each other's gender roles and how you are sort of behaving, and okay, what am I supposed to do, what I'm not supposed to do, how I'm supposed to behave, etc., etc. Right? Um, Females are generally known to aid in each other's development, whereas males are more or less fighting against each other for superiority. Then the last concept is of attachment, which is basically the shared connection that a child has with its caregiver, right? And that sort of gives quality to a relationship. Um, There are four types. There is secure attachment, which the infant will be okay if the caregiver is not there, and when the caregiver comes back, they'll sort of get up, they'll go back to them. Avoidant attachment is where the child will not sort of care if the caregiver leaves, and when they come back, they don't really care and they don't want to go back to them. Ambivalent or resistant attachment style is when the infant is anxious even before the caregiver leaves, so they're already fearing that the caregiver is going to leave, and when the caregiver comes back, they sort of seek them out very quickly, and there is extreme sadness when the caregiver is not there. And disorganized, disoriented attachment is when the infant doesn't know what to do, so they'll behave in very random ways. They'll cry, they'll go hug the caregiver, or they'll not miss the caregiver. They'll just sit. Right, so very contradictory sort of behaviors.